ambition, conquest, lust, murder, and the power of unrivaled technology. These are the cornerstones in the foundation of the Roman Empire.
They were driven by a kind of collective cultural ego.
Rome's colossal building projects, stadiums, palaces, roads, aqueducts, span 3 continents and unleash the power and promise of the world's most advanced civilization.
These structures became symbols of that idea of Rome.
But while the Romans dominated the landscape with massive feats of construction, they were ultimately powerless to prevent their own self-destruction. March 15th, 44 BC. The most powerful man in the world lay lifeless on the floor of the Roman Senate. As a general, he nearly doubled the size of the Roman Empire. As a politician, he engineered a stunning rise to power. But now this battle-scarred warrior had been slain in Rome and by Romans. His name was Gaius Julius Caesar.
Caesar's rise to power was predicated on him wanting to have the best standing in the Roman state. He seemed to want too much power for himself. He did not share power with others, and this was what led directly to his assassination.
When he was declared Rome's first dictator for life, at the age of 55 in 44 BC, whispers of assassination began to echo through the halls of the Roman Senate.
He makes certain moves that suggest that he might want to have been worshipped as a god, that his ambition really goes so far beyond the limits of what the Romans themselves, and in particular Roman senators, felt to be acceptable, that he was assassinated.
In life, Julius Caesar forever altered Rome's political landscape. In death, he would embody both the potential and the peril of absolute power.
When Caesar was assassinated, there was no guarantee that anything would happen except that Rome would fall apart completely.
Caesar's reign was a major turning point in Rome's political history. His conquest of Gaul greatly expanded the reach of Roman influence. His consolidation of power marked the death of the Roman Republic, ruled by democratically elected senators and consuls, and the birth of an empire in which tyrannical emperors could rule with absolute authority. Some would use their power to build magnificent engineering marvels. The vanity, excess, and ignorance of others would push the empire to the brink of destruction. Through it all, Rome would grow into the most powerful and technologically advanced civilization the world had ever seen. Today, Rome is a 21st century city where the ancient and modern collide.
Anyone who's visited the city of Rome is immediately struck by this immense mixture of time periods spanning from prehistory all the way up through the modern age. And the wonderful thing about Rome is that you're living in the midst of the history of one of the greatest civilizations that's ever been a part of humanity's history.
Roman legend says the city was founded in 753 BC by Romulus and Remus, 2 brothers who were abandoned as infants and raised by a she-wolf. The 2 brothers set out to build their own city on the banks of the Tiber River. But a disagreement over who would rule it ended in murder. Remus was killed at the hands of Romulus, for whom the city of Rome is named. It would not be the last time bloodshed produced a new Roman ruler.
civil war actually is one of the very defining features of the growth of the Roman state. The story, the tradition of Romulus and Remus is one that reverberates and echoes throughout Roman history.
Initially, Rome was one of countless small kingdoms jockeying for power in central Italy. But unlike many of its neighbors, who were suspicious of outsiders, Rome was a safe haven for ambitious outcasts.
Romulus, he said, given the fact that we don't have any population, I'll create an asylum. I will create a sort of a free zone for anybody. Runaway slaves, brigands, pirates, whoever. Come and be part of this great idea, which is Rome. That's a very unique attitude. And said from the very beginning, it seemed that the Romans were very open.
This openness encouraged a free exchange of ideas. Among them were engineering theories imported from other cultures. By borrowing the technology of neighbors like the Etruscans, Rome expanded into a regional power.
The Romans had an extraordinary ability to take from the technological past and adapt it to their own purposes and to refine it and to improve upon it. They were able to take from these Etruscans the technology of road building, of moving water systems through tunnels, of building large, extraordinary walls, and produce something which was based on Etruscan technology.
The city's first major engineering achievement was the Cloaca Maxima, an extensive sewer system which still functions today 2,500 years after it was constructed. The Cloaca Maxima flushed runoff from Rome's city streets into the Tiber River. Engineers also used the sewer's underground pipeline to drain the marshland between Rome's hilltop villages. There they built the Forum, ancient Rome's downtown district.
The construction of the Cloaca Maxima is the key event in transforming Rome from a series of tribes living on disparate hills around a swampy marsh into kind of centralized, unified culture. The new Roman Forum that resulted from the draining with the Cloaca Maxima really allowed that culture to consolidate in one central place.
While Rome's culture was consolidating, the influence the city had over its neighbors began to grow. By the 4th century BC, Rome controlled most of central Italy, and its engineers were called on to develop a transportation infrastructure that would connect the expanding empire.
In antiquity, there were basically two modes of transportation. There was transportation through the countryside, either on horseback, but probably walking or in carts, or that there was travel by ship. The roads, as we understand them today, basically didn't exist before the Roman Empire.
That all changed in 312 BC, when the Via Appia was built. Rome's first national highway stretched 132 miles from the capital to its southern province of Campania. Once the ideal path was cleared, a broad trench was dug and filled in with sand and boulders to form a solid foundation. Next went a layer of gravel compacted with clay or mortar. The top surface was a layer of thick paving stones angled to allow the water to drain off to the side.
The roads were incredibly intimidating. You could look at a road and say, I wonder how long it takes to get a couple of legions, 10,000 guys down this road, right into my backyard. I think I'll think twice about starting any nonsense with Rome.
By the time of Julius Caesar's assassination in 44 BC, Rome controlled most of Western Europe and North Africa. It had defeated Carthage a century earlier, making it the Mediterranean world's lone superpower. Caesar's eventual successor was his great-nephew Octavian, who was renamed Augustus and crowned Rome's first imperator, or emperor. Under Augustus, the Roman road network expanded to reach the farthest corners of the empire. and with the highways paved, it was time to build new destinations.
Under Augustus, we can see popping up everywhere Roman-style cities equipped with a forum, with a theater, with an amphitheater, with a basilica, and all of the other markers of what made a Roman city.
To the recently conquered natives of the provinces, the new cities were a powerful endorsement of the Roman way of life.
People would flock to the new cities, these urban centers, which were symbols of civilization, a higher standard of living, incredible jobs. That's where the money resided, and people would go, as today, will go where the jobs are. And ultimately, the people in these conquered nations would really embrace these Roman ideas.
The Roman city itself was the greatest image-creating device, I believe, that the Romans had. And those cities survive today. London, Bonn, Paris are all testaments to Rome's expansion of its culture through its cities.
Rome's engineers had a secret weapon that enabled them to build bigger, stronger, and faster than anyone else. Waterproof concrete, mixed with a volcanic sand called pozzolana.
Early concretes were just a simple lime-mortar mix, which, although they would set, weren't very strong, and indeed the particles in the early concrete could easily break apart. But in Roman concrete, the pozzolan sand reacted with the lime, and it makes the concrete quite like a modern concrete, much, much stronger.
They realized pretty early on that by using this substance that they could build literally underwater, an extraordinary invention which would allow them then to create enormous piers literally within the water itself, revolutionizing travel. That is, bridges could be built that would be permanent bridges rather than wooden bridges.
During the age of Augustus, this concrete solidified Rome's chokehold on Western Europe, allowing Roman builders to dominate the landscape with massive man-made monoliths. One in particular would revolutionize daily life in Rome for centuries to come. Of all the achievements of Rome's engineers, none were as life-altering as running water.
Rome's system of water distribution was a quantum leap to anything which had come before it.
In the capital city, 11 aqueduct lines guided a steady stream of fresh water to its citizens, carrying a combined 200 million gallons a day into the city from mountain springs miles away.
So much water was available in the city of Rome, and this sustained an enormous population.
The aqueducts fostered the growth of a new urban culture. With a constant stream of water, up to 1 million people were able to live cleanly and comfortably in the capital city.
And it's the water from the aqueducts which can flush out the human filth and keep your city clean. This is another reason why the Romans think that they're superior. It's because they're cleaner than everybody else.
No single emperor can claim credit for the success of the aqueducts. They were built over the course of several centuries. But it was the disfigured, stuttering Emperor Claudius who arguably had the greatest impact on Rome's water supply. During the reign of Claudius, the empire took several surprising steps forward. On the frontier, his legions conquered Britannia, something even Julius Caesar failed to do. And back home, he built 2 major aqueducts, the Aqua Claudia and the Anio Novus, which dramatically increased the amount of water flowing into Rome.
Aqueducts are not that complicated in theory. That is that water seeks its lowest level, and therefore that you can run water down a slope from any area to another area. So that's a pretty simple premise that everybody would have known. But the practice of creating an aqueduct is another thing.
The Romans engineered their aqueducts to approach the city on a gradual declining angle, or gradient. That gradient was just several inches every 100 feet.
The slope of the aqueduct had to be calculated from great distances, 20, 30, sometimes even 40 miles, from the source in the mountains to the cities themselves. That had to be consistent. They couldn't deviate from it, regardless of what the terrain was.
To maintain the water's precise descent through high mountains, Roman engineers dug perfectly angled tunnels through them. When the pipelines reached low valleys, they were elevated on stone walls. If the walls needed to be higher than 6.5 feet off the ground, the Romans saved building materials while still adding strength by perfecting an ancient engineering concept, the arch.
The arch revolutionized architecture in the ancient world by permitting far greater spans than had been allowable before. They basically changed the spatial conception totally of Roman architecture.
Arches were built around a temporary wooden framework that held each stone in place until the keystone was laid in the center. The keystone evenly distributed weight down each side of the arch, allowing builders to stack additional stones above it.
Arches are improvement upon building just a straight wall in a variety of means, both in terms of their efficiency and in terms of their strength. The arch, of course, takes much less material to build. Arches are very strong at supporting things like roofs and aqueducts and whatever you want to put on top of them.
A 6-mile column of arches carried the Aqua Claudia across the valleys on its way to Rome.
The aqueducts would have had a covered roof, but of course if you could take the roof off, you could see the water like an open river coming down towards the city.
After reaching the city, each aqueduct emptied into 3 holding tanks. One for the public drinking fountains, a second for the public baths, and a third reserved for the emperor and other wealthy Romans who paid for their own running water, a concept that was well ahead of its time.
Basically, every home by the 1st or 2nd century AD of any means had running water. This is astounding because the entire span of the Middle Ages, they didn't have this.